Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our webinar here. We have a European perspective. Do you need an MBA to be an entrepreneur? And to answer that question and many more, we have two fantastic folks with us today, one in London, one in Barcelona, two of my favorite European cities by far, from the Bay School of Business, and that is formerly the Cass School of Business at City, the University of London. We have Professor Costas MBA. I'm going to screw this up. I knew I was going to screw it up, Costas.
Don't worry at all.
And Andropoulos, there we go.
Yes, great.
Professor of Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the Associate Dean of MBA Programs at the Bay School. And from ESADE in Barcelona, we have Jan Holberger, the MBA Director at ESADE Business School. Welcome. So let's go right to the question. Do you really need an MBA to be an entrepreneur? I know many MBA students, in fact, use their MBA programs as incubators for business ideas. What do you find, Costas? Well, how would you answer that question? Do you need an MBA to do a startup?
Of course, you need an MBA to do a startup because, first of all, it's the curriculum, which is quite focused in terms of teaching people an overview of the skills needed to start and grow a business. So to start and also scale a business, which is something that a lot of startups and startup founders are focusing on. Then it's also, to me, a very serious playground, a degree, because if you don't do a degree, you will never get the opportunity to actually do a little bit of introspection, self-reflection about your career goals, or ambitions, dreams that you had when you were a child in terms of starting your own business. So it gives you the forum. It also gives you the community where community may be your fellow classmates, alumni, as well as the faculty, to start thinking more about your idea. So these three things are quite important in terms of pursuing, for instance, an entrepreneurial career. So sometimes we're talking about starting a business in terms of entrepreneurship, but sometimes we're also talking about starting a new initiative in an established organization, so intrapreneurship. So either or, formal education and the serious playground that I was discussing earlier are extremely important to take these initiatives further.
The other thing is, in a business school with an MBA program that's very good, you have an incredibly supportive and encouraging network of people around you, and like-minded people in many cases who want to do good with business, want to generate value. And I imagine in that cocoon of support, that in and of itself is very valuable to someone who is trying to push forward a business idea, right?
Yes, I think sometimes students are coming with an idea. Sometimes students are joining the program with no idea that they want, for instance, to start a business. And by getting exposed to different courses, by getting exposed to different cases, by getting exposed to different speakers, sometimes what happens is they start thinking about pursuing the childhood dream that they had. So this thing starts becoming a little bit of more interesting, more important, and start getting some flesh and blood. So what you were saying earlier is extremely important. So they are actually joining not a program, but an ecosystem. And at Base, we have worked really hard to develop an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And that ecosystem comprises of, for instance, co-working spaces. We have a couple of co-working spaces, mentors, alumni who have started businesses in the past, who have grown businesses in the past, as well as our own venture capital fund. So we have our own venture capital fund, which is not philanthropy. I have to make it clear. Its purpose is to generate good returns in terms of the investment, but at the same time, to invest in some of the companies that are initiated or started from our students, but also to invest in companies which are beyond the business school or even the university. So we have all this ecosystem that supports this. So people from the fund will interact with our students, we'll talk about fundraising, they will be judges in business plan competitions. So there is a very formal and very hands-on ecosystem that can help potential entrepreneurs to develop their ideas further.
That's great. Now, John, I'm assuming you have the same point of view as Costas has here on whether or not you need an MBA to be an entrepreneur. Am I right?
Yes, I mean, it's very difficult to disagree. Maybe I would say you don't need to, but I think it gives you maybe the edge and it helps you. That's maybe a point of difference. And I very much what Costa's saying, let me summarize it. I think it often is like knowledge, connection, capital. And all of this you can get. And it's very important to see as an MBA. And I like the word, I think you mentioned, it's kind of a playground for experimentation. It gives people the possibility to explore. And this is particularly important for people who maybe thought about doing entrepreneurship, but they're not there, maybe missing certain components, maybe sometimes even confidence. And then in a safe environment, together with the people and support of the faculty, they can find it. And I think that's also important that in most MBAs, or particularly in European MBAs, you have a large number of people not from a business background. And they maybe have insights from their work experience, from the industries, but it's very hard to do the first steps. And if we can help the first steps connect the people, then they can start running. And I'm saying this because, of course, entrepreneurship is not an academic activity. I'm an academic. I'm a nerd by nature. I like being nerdy, but we have to be clear. Entrepreneurship is experimentation, is getting your hands dirty. And we want to help you there. And I think we can do that.
You know, I'm always amused by people who are cynical about this. There are some people who say, well, why spend your tuition on an MBA when you can use that money as your seed capital to launch a business? And the truth is that people who launch businesses and don't know anything about finance, accounting, strategy, marketing, operations, leadership are at a great disadvantage over those who do know and are trained and skilled in those disciplines. Because the truth is that new businesses have a very high failure rate. And one thing that I think an MBA education does is reduce that failure rate significantly, in addition to all the support that we're talking about. Now, Jan, at ESADE, how do you approach entrepreneurship in the MBA program?
I think for us, again, we have different pillars. I mean, one is a structural component in the program and surround it to create this ecosystem. And it starts with certain classes, accelerator programs, entrepreneurship clubs, so the structural components of the ecosystem. Okay. But then I think the most important part of this is create a culture of entrepreneurship. And this is sometimes very hard to explain and feel, but I often recommend for our students to go on a campus to feel what it is. How many similar-minded students do you have who maybe give you this extra push to give you the confidence to do the next steps, to explore a bit? And I think this is equally important. So this is structural components and an entrepreneurial culture. And this together, I think, then really can help to increase the chances of success of entrepreneurship. We cannot guarantee it. As you said, the failure rates of entrepreneurship are very, very high. It is a difficult, exciting, but a difficult task, but we want to get higher chances of success. And that's what we're trying to do.
Right. Costas, how does your school, Bayes, approach this topic?
First of all, I agree with what Jan was saying earlier, and I love what he said, because this is very similar to what we do. We take a very hands-on approach, which means that, of course, we're doing what's expected from an MBA program, which is the cases, but we are also very hands-on. We want our students to be amazing in analyzing the situation, synthesizing, and then presenting, but at the same time, we're looking to nurture creativity. So we're looking to develop creators. So something that we do in our MBA program is we're also focusing a lot on new product development. We're focusing on students in teams developing new products. And if I'm honest, this is something that, you know, a lot of people struggle with. I mean, they're amazing at doing analysis. They're amazing at presenting, for instance, findings or helping a client. But when they have to present something, this is where it starts getting a lot of very challenging. And this is where we focus a lot. And this is where we spend a lot of time. Whether you are joining the corporate world, or whether you want to go back to your family business, or whether you want to start your own business, one thing is for sure, that you have to develop a product. You have to develop a service. You have to wow your customers. You have to wow your clients. This is never ending. And what COVID actually taught us was that the companies which actually survived or thrived were the companies that managed to change everything that they were doing, that managed to develop new products, new services, to cater to those changing needs. So I think it's important for students to become creators, sometimes hands-on creators, with their hands to develop things, and to become comfortable with discomfort, which I think is one of the most important things that somebody can learn while doing a degree. So there is an element of discomfort when you're starting a business. There is an element of discomfort when you're growing a business. So we would like to normalize this. We would like people to actually understand this in the safe environment, as Jan was saying earlier, and take these lessons when they graduate from our school and to their own teams. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I wanted to add, a final point, was that for us, because our cohorts are relatively small, if you compare us with other schools, is that learning and our interaction with our students doesn't end when they graduate from us. So I had several cases where students of mine 3 or 4 years ago doing their MBA, they came back to me and saying, now I want to start a business. So can you help me out? Can the community help me out in terms of support me, in terms of pushing my idea further? So for us, this is like a family. And when I'm saying family, it means that whenever they decide to go ahead with something, we will be there to support them.
That's great.
Maybe John,
yes.
Can I add something? Because I really like what Costa was saying. And
yes.
As you said, this approach, what you're describing, I think it's important for business in general if we want to be successful. And sometimes people ask me, ESADE is a generalistic MBA. It's not a specialized MBA itself, but we believe that everybody has to have this drive at experimentation with creating something, and then even big businesses can profit from these experiences. And then often we see that people who didn't expect to be entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs, as you said, or people who maybe go back to business, they decide like 2-3 years later, actually, I want to become an entrepreneur, and then they build back on these skills. I think they're fundamentally business skills. So entrepreneurship, therefore, is also not only something for startups, it's for scales up. Large companies, they need it, and they come to us and they demand that. Family business, as you said, they need that. So it's the core of business, creating something, and then of course selling it and finding a market for it. But yeah, and when you said it is challenging, it's also the exciting part of business, I think.
And that's a really good point, because you're right. Even large companies are looking for people with entrepreneurial mindsets. They want people who can think differently. They want people who get things accomplished with fewer resources, and who will take personal initiative and have the drive to get stuff done. And so entrepreneurial thinking and the approach of launching new products or services is something that big and small companies want, in addition to the fact that obviously if you have a great idea, now you probably have the means and the encouragement and the support network to actually go for it yourself. Now, Costas, I wonder, as a professor of entrepreneurship, what you have seen distinguishes good ideas from bad ideas that students have when launching new businesses.
That's a great question, and I'm smiling because this is where we spend a lot of time, and this is where we're actually focusing a lot. We're saying, look at the market. Are there a lot of people doing this? That's a saturated market, mature market. Leave it for somebody else. That's not for you. We would like to push radical innovation, because to me, entrepreneurship is closely linked with radical breakthrough, disruptive innovation, depending on the definitions that you want to use. So we focus a lot on this. There are a couple of things that convinced us that we have to focus on this. The first one is that nobody notices an entrepreneur who incrementally, let's say, launches a new product into the market. They go unnoticed. So that's the first thing. The second thing is not exciting. The third thing is investors don't get excited about this. Investors would like to actually invest into the future. So a lot of times what we're saying is, don't think about what customers need today. Think about what customers may be needing in the future. When I'm saying the future, in the next 3 years, the next 5 years, and start working backwards on how you can actually accomplish this. So a lot of our students spend a lot of time looking at the future as well as looking at the gaps. Otherwise, we don't feel that there is a lot of value or creating something. So there are a lot of interactions. Having said that, this can be also quite challenging for a lot of them. And this can be also demotivating, because as you can imagine, people come with the ideas and then we come and they were saying, no. So you have to go back to the drawing board. And At the beginning, it doesn't go down well. But then when they reflect, when they introspect, they realize that there is merit in the whole conversation. So they go back and they try to actually do something else. So there is a lot of back and forth in what we're discussing. And I think they have to realize that this is the way forward. They also have to realize that if they ever want to actually raise money from an investor, when I'm saying an investor, I'm talking about a professional investor, then those interactions will be happening for a long period of time. So I think this is important for all of us to actually discuss at the beginning of the course or at the beginning of, when they join the program, so that everybody knows what the expectations are.
And that validation of an idea, even if in fact it's negative, is it highly valuable to a would-be entrepreneur, because if you were alone trying to do this or just with some friends, you wouldn't have that cold-hearted, I'll put it that way, hard analysis that says, okay, this may be an idea, but there's too much competition, or this may be an idea, but it really can't scale, or this could be an idea, but the market, the addressable market, isn't big enough to interest any venture capitalists or angel investors. So that's all important as well. Now, Jan, I'm wondering where I'm going to just scale out this. I think in the early days, business schools taught entrepreneurship as basically putting together a business plan. And then business schools evolved into creating frameworks for people to launch leaner startups, meaning with very few resources. In the US, we call it bootstrapping a startup. Where are we now in the scheme of things in terms of entrepreneurship and how it's taught?
Okay, and I have to detour maybe here a bit. Maybe I can say, when I started my PhD, I wanted to write a PhD in business planning. I'm very happy that I haven't done it, because it's dead. It's very, very dead. So I remember I also was doing a lot of business plan competition like 15, 20 years ago. That's definitely not the case. The lean business model was very, very good. I think now, I don't think we have a dominant stream. I think their lean business model still works and it's still going very, very successful. Okay. And we see another trend, particularly with our international group, is like entrepreneurship arbitrage between different markets. We see social entrepreneurship really driving much stronger. Maybe it's also a bit of a bias. In our school, for example, we see less like tech in itself in our school. So there maybe it's a certain bias of the school. Now, what we try to do, that we have a general approach of our course, but then give the students the option to find their niche with different approaches, because we know that not every entrepreneurship approach works for every business and for each entrepreneur. And that's sometimes hard to say, because certain professors or certain academics, they have a certain approach, and of course they believe their book, their consulting tool is the best. But we as a school, we deliberately don't try to do that. We don't want the classical phrase, we treat everything like a nail because we only have a hammer. We try to be here specific and then find then the right approach. And sometimes that means that it's not the entrepreneurship professor, it's somebody from the accelerator. It's an alumni we have to go to and rely more on this support, because he or she knows more about this environment, this market, and then we build on this skill. So I would say it's a non-agnostic approach to entrepreneurship. It maybe doesn't sound like a catchword so much, but I think it's a more realistic and efficient way and to think about entrepreneurship.
Right. And yeah, I'm thinking that as we talk about the evolution of entrepreneurship at business schools, you can go back to the day when, creating a simple application for a mobile phone was a hot idea. Yeah. Creating an application where people met each other for dating was a hot idea. Then, creating companies that have organic or natural foods had been a big idea. And maybe that evolved into fintech. And now I'm wondering, are we looking more at startups that are focused around sustainability issues, social impact issues than ever before, compared to some of these other areas where many students were launching businesses? What do you find?
Yeah, I think, for example, the time of we make a platform, a two-sided platform out of everything from flowers and babysitting. I think it's definitely over. So we at ESADE, and I can hear again as a buyer, for example, we see have a very, very strong focus on social entrepreneurship. It's a very, very strong drive. We still see a lot of B2B actually picking up in our space. Again, could be a sample. Even so, actually, Barcelona is a bit more B2C in general, I would argue. But at the school, we have a very big trend on B2B. The last few years, everything, say blockchain, crypto was of course very, very hot. We see maybe a bit of pivoting right now, and maybe as a meta trend, what is also happening is we saw the push for extreme growth in itself as a main mean of motivating a business is also, I think, over. I think based on the current situation, we see much more sustainable business models coming up, also from investors pushing for this much more. So I think these are trends infusing right now, and I think we're pivoting here right now. We see actually this pivot as we speak.
Right. Costas, do you see the same trend in interest in students in different kinds of things today than they were years ago?
Absolutely, and I agree with Jan. We see similar patterns, and of course, different regions have different, for instance, priorities or, for instance, labor to work with. So in London, you see a lot of companies or startups focusing on AI-enabled stuff, because AI enables companies to perform an activity task better. So we see those kind of things. We see cybersecurity as being extremely interesting to a lot of students. Also, we see that some students focus on ways to address COVID, or as Jan was saying, a little bit of B2B. So there are these kind of things. As you can imagine, students are sometimes younger, and they have they follow the market. And this is what I'm always saying. It is not what we discuss here. It's what you see, for instance, what you observe. So a lot of the things that we actually talk about is observation and, talking to people. When I'm saying talking, not only to your friends or your family, but also to strangers, because what happens, especially in London, what you see in the underground, what you see when you walk, it's people, that are stuck into their smartphones, right? So what I'm saying to my students is not to do this, figure out how people consume, how people get the entertainment, how people shop. So in order to identify those kind of needs. So there are these kinds of changes that we also see here. The location, I think, sometimes affects, as Jan was saying, the choice. So for instance, we are in the middle of Silicon Roundabout, which is an area which is called Shoreditch, and this is where a lot of startups are based, and also the City of London, which is the financial center. So we're in between, and because we're in between, we also see a lot of focus on fintech. So, and it's not surprising, right? Because this is what they get exposed to. The country has a lot of, let's say, tradition and background on this, and of course the city. So there is a lot of focus on that. And traditionally, historically, we have been, for instance, educating people for this industry.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it makes total sense. Tell us a little bit about, Costas, the MBA program in general now. Let's broaden the discussion to your approach to MBA education. How long has your MBA been in existence? What kind of people is it best suited for, do you think?
Yes, so we have been around since the 70s. So it's not a new program, as you can imagine. And normally the students who join us are international, as you were saying at the beginning, very diverse in terms of gender and background. And as I guess with other MBA programs, what they are looking for is either to start the business, become more entrepreneurial, or take the family business at one point and rejuvenate, for instance, the product portfolio, change careers, change companies. So we have a portfolio, for instance, of people who are joining us. The program starts, as all the MBA programs, with the basics, and then people can choose for instance, with electives, and they can develop their own concentration. But there is a focus on what I was saying earlier in terms of them taking agency of their learning and also becoming creators of something. So what we are helping our students to do is not only to develop their analytical and the skills in terms of synthesis and writing and presenting, but also to create things. There was a question earlier from you, John, about what has changed. And what we are doing in the program, whenever the opportunity arises, is that we're saying, this is 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It used to be send us a business plan. We'll have a look at it, but not anymore, because I'm also part of the fund that we have. So I have been with the fund for the last 5-6 years, and I have seen a lot of great companies, and a lot of great companies have actually presented to us. It starts with the product. So they have to focus on, and this is what Jan was saying earlier about experimentation and new product development. So it needs to start with the product. Then if people are happy and they still like you, they like the space and they like the product, they will ask you to do a pitch deck. And the business plan is more like the due diligence document. And we follow something similar when we teach entrepreneurship, or something similar in terms of the other courses, so that it's about them creating something. So I think this is where we focus a lot in our program. And we also believe, and that will be my final point in your question, we also believe in a thin balance between challenging our students, but also supporting them. So this is a very thin, fine balance. Because if you only challenge them, then you can create some very overstressed, overwhelmed people. But if you over support them, then you can develop some people who never actually develop resilience, right? Or people who are always, it's about them. So we always have this balance, which means that it's like a video game. They move from one level to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. Or of course, the next one is going to be much harder than the previous one.
Right. And you're building on the knowledge and the experience of having mastered those previous ones to move further and further away and up. And the other thing about the approach to entrepreneurship is, I'm sure that I think it's become more customer centric, that people need to be much more aware of the needs of their potential consumers of their product or service, and approach their entrepreneurship that way as well. I'm sure, Costas, that is one element of launching a new business idea, right?
Of course. And the other thing that we have is that we have our own, we call it business mastery project, but basically it's a thesis that they have to actually do at the end. And a lot of our students, they don't want to do, for instance, a research project, which they can do. They would like to write a business plan. And of course, to develop a deck, and of course, develop the product further. And this is something that we always tell them. It's better to actually win or lose on paper rather than with real money, right? So this is an opportunity. Again, it's the safety net, as Jan was saying earlier, that we create here, where students learn and they develop something. And a lot of times they use this to develop the business. So I had students who have used, for instance, their thesis to start the business. I had students who focused on developing a new fund, and they actually joined a venture capital fund. So all these opportunities are quite important. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was that our MBA program is a 1-year program. So right. It's quite condensed, as you can imagine. And we basically live with them. When I'm saying live with them in quotes, which is that we spend a lot of time with them. And it's not only about entrepreneurship, this is more about everybody who is involved in the program. If we're talking about the full-time MBA, so it's a cohort where the faculty and the support, for instance, group spends a lot of time with them. Because we know that it's condensed, we would like to actually to give as much as we can, and for them to learn as much as they can.
Yep. So Jan, share with us a bit about your program. How long has it been around? Who's attracted to it? And who do you think it best serves?
Okay, so ESADE MBA program was founded in 1964. So for European MBA, it's actually quite old. And I think our founding story is quite related to this topic, because we were founded actually by the local business people in Barcelona together with the Jesuits. And while I would say we are officially still a school with associated to the Jesuits and a part of our board, it doesn't feel like, but the underlying values remain. in the program today. This is on one hand side social impact, and on the other hand, entrepreneurship and business sense. In the sense, ESADE was always more than a research school, an entrepreneurial or business sense school. And you see this still, that a lot of our faculty has research activities, but still running businesses, consulting businesses, very, very important. So the other basic facts are we developed, we are a program with 180 students, more than 40 nationalities, very diverse. And normally at least 1/3 of the cohort is female, often larger percentages, very, very international. And what is important when we talk about entrepreneurship, as I mentioned before, that is we are a general program, but we believe entrepreneurship is core to us, and this is one of our main pillars. And therefore, it's everybody, even if you're not becoming or thinking right now of becoming an entrepreneur, you will have to do a certain amount of entrepreneurship courses and get knowledge and think about product development and implementation. And for us, then it's always like we're trying to experiment, but also get our hands dirty. So it's not only case study, it's real life project, consulting project. So for example, our final master project, it's real life consulting projects for real firms together with Monitor Deloitte, some of them for large firms, some of them for startups. So it's not a theoretical project, we're really working that. Regarding the duration, we have a flexible program. Students can stay with us from 12, 15, or 18 months. And I think that's often quite beneficial for students. So they finish very quickly, or they try to push through the core activities, pick some electives, and then use some of the other months to experiment in a safe way. And then it kind of automatically moves over to some of our ecosystem. So for example, if a student finish, they maybe directly go to some of the accelerator programs, which we have on campus. So then it's even hard to say, have you finished the MBA, or are you still doing your MBA, or are you working for your company already? Or it's an interesting situation, but it goes about is you live and breathe entrepreneurship and business in a certain way.
The largest percentage of your students take it in 12, 15, or 18 months?
15 months. 15 months.
Right
in the middle. And I think it's good in the context to have a bit of breathing space. I like 12 months. It's good if you directly want to go, and when you have, or if you have to go back to business, or you have your project very clear. 15 months, I think, is for our students a good middle ground. And then sometimes when you go longer, it's maybe too much experimentation. And at one point of time, you say, okay, let's get a bit more serious, whether it's for the real business application or for the business. Then finish, and then you go to the accelerator we have on campus and enter there.
Right.
What else is important?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please, John, please.
Okay, John. What's the level of demand you've seen for the program recently? How are things going?
We see changes in demand. I think that's very clear. At the moment, our program is still over capacity. So we have technically 180 seats. And at the moment, we have 184 students this year. So we see changes in the demand in the profile, particularly region-wise. So I think you have, as poets and quants have written about this to a certain extent already. Also, downturn in America, we see this as well. Maybe less applicants from America, but we see still very strong demand from other regions. Middle East, also Europe is for us still relatively strong. So that it helps to be have a very diverse program, because if you say 180 students, 40 nationalities, you can see, I mean, there's not necessarily one group of students which are 40% of the cohort. It's relatively split. I mean, we have a few more Germans. We have actually more Germans than Spaniards, interestingly enough, or Italians than Spaniards in the program. But this changes for us a bit the demand situation, particularly to some of the American schools, which very, very focused on the American market.
Yes. Costas, what about the level of demand for your program?
Our full-time MBA is relatively smaller than the ESADE, so we have around 50 people. And this is what I was discussing earlier, that we spend a lot of time with them. So it's about them joining a family that we have. And as Jan was saying, we see some changes in terms of the demographics or the composition. We have less interest from the US for next year. And I don't know. I mean, we are not done yet in terms of recruiting. So this thing is a work in progress. But we still get interest from Europe. A lot of people want to come to London. I think London is a magnet in terms of joining a business school, and especially where we are located, because they would like to be surrounded by companies that are either in the investment banking, consulting, or startups or large organizations. So this is still quite of interest to a lot of students. But this is an interesting topic, and we have to wait and see what will happen in terms of the near future.
Right. And you mentioned the obvious appeal of London and of course the appeal of Barcelona, two great European capitals. I wonder, how can you describe how the location of your school contributes to the overall experience of a graduate student? So obviously, in London, there are many distractions in a way. I mean, there's so many different wonderful things to do, whether you're going to take a walk in Hyde Park or go to a West End play, or to go for a day trip or go to the Churchill War Rooms. I mean, there's so many different things to do. How does that all contribute to that experience for your students?
Yes. First of all, we consider this.
For the life of the professors too. For the life of the professors too, and the academic directors.
That's a great point. And I didn't want to start with this, but I could finish with it. But to be honest with you, we see it as a very positive distraction or a pleasurable distraction, because I think what we want to develop is people who we want to develop holistically somebody, right? So, and I think London offers everything. It also offers the culture that you are saying, in terms of museums, in terms of galleries, in terms of music, as well as the hospitality, in terms of restaurants, and as well as the things that we're discussing today, which is the startup ecosystem, which is the VCs, which is the accelerators. And this is what we are always suggesting to our students, is move beyond, what we have created here. And there are a lot of things that you can do. This is a big city that you can explore. And I'm sure it's the same with Barcelona, which is one of the cities which I love. And the interesting thing is we see this as in a very positive light. At the same time, we don't want to be, for our students to be London centric. So we have all these international field trips that we do. So we take students to different parts of Europe and in the US, where we actually are getting, I'm leading, for instance, an elective which is in Silicon Valley, where I get my students exposed to the another entrepreneurial system. But we also discuss about, how entrepreneurship can have a very positive impact to the world. So it's nice to actually be in London, but we would like people to think beyond London. So I think it's important to have this nice balance. So to me, it's not either or. It's about having both, the London thing, but also the global outlook.
True.
And for professors, since Jan actually mentioned it, I have to admit, this is an amazing place to actually live and work, because you have very interesting companies in your backyard, as we are saying, but also the culture that this place actually gives to you. It can also take you to other places in terms of imagination, in terms of creativity and things that you want to do.
Very true. I mean, I've had the privilege of living in London for 3-4 years of my life, and there were some of the best years ever. And incidentally, Barcelona and its Gothic quarter, I can just tell you, Jan, I can get lost there and spend hours and hours and never want to leave. So how does Barcelona contribute to the overall experience of your graduate students?
I mean, very much. And we know that students, when they look for MBA programs, they're looking also for cities. And I think we, Costa and myself, we are in a very fortunate situation that we live in very attractive cities. Similar to what Costa said, we try to embed ourselves in the ecosystem, and London, as much as Barcelona, both are one of the top entrepreneurship hubs in Europe and in the world. And it's very clear with a different industry and sectoral focus. That's also clear, but in both senses, I'm very, very strong. And as Costa said, what we try to, we have the roots in Barcelona, but then go from the roots in the world, whether it's Berlin, Tel Aviv, San Francisco, Miami, places to the Middle East, where we go with study tours, treks. We really take advantage of the international entrepreneurship ecosystem and also get additional ideas. Now, to be a bit contentious in this meeting, I will raise two topics. First of all, even at the moment, we are not doing that good. We have the much better football club at FC Barcelona. And I love London, but I have to say Barcelona is the best city on the planet. And I say this as a German who was living in Sydney beforehand. And I always make the same. I think Barcelona is not the best in anything, but top 5 in everything. If you talk about culture, probably London has a bit more, but we are top 5. Beaches, I think we beat London and many other places. Food, absolutely. Weather as well. Architecture, we are there. Football club, we're getting there again. Okay, we lost Messi, but we will have another chance and we're doing well. So I love Barcelona, and of course for students that is beneficial. It's an exposure, it's a stimulating, it's a vibrant environment, but it also can sometimes be a distraction for students and professors. And I think Costas and my job is sometimes also to manage that.
If you're a student in Barcelona, you will have many late night dinners with friends.
Yes.
In sidewalk cafes that you will remember for a lifetime.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
That's
you have to learn
true.
you have to learn to live with less sleep. That's definitely true.
Now, Costas, is it still a good idea to launch a company? I mean, you can argue that we live in such a turbulent and uncertain world. There are all questions about the economy right now. There's, questions about what's going on in Ukraine with Russia. Politics throughout the world seems more polarized than ever before. Is this really a good time to launch a company for a student?
For sure, because first of all, I believe that there are always going to be problems, but it's the way that you approach this. So do you see problems as threats, or do you see problems as opportunities? And something that we discuss and something that we focus on is that we live in a very interesting time where somebody has access to a lot of information that has to do with the past, with the present, and the future, right? And you can actually know what is happening globally. What we don't see, though, is that a lot of companies actually focusing on solving these problems. However, I'm quite optimistic that startups can start solving those problems because they come with a fresh pair of eyes. They have some interesting ideas. Maybe they find new solutions to some old problems. So I still feel that there is a lot of potential in terms of starting a business now, because first of all, we have a lot of big problems and which require urgently solutions. And unfortunately, large organizations have already put the mark somewhere, and they find it extremely difficult to change, the whole strategy, to change the resources, to change, for instance, their culture in terms of addressing them. So there is a whole, for instance, space for startups to actually address. There is a whole space of problems for startups to focus on. There is still a lot of money out there in terms of VC, in terms of family offices, in terms of hedge funds, in terms of asset managers. So there is still a lot of money. There are still big problems. So what entrepreneurs have to do is to connect their solutions to those problems, and then, for instance, to the markets, and of course to the money. So I'm still, for instance, optimistic about this.
Yeah, and I almost think the very definition of an entrepreneur is someone who takes advantage of a challenge, who sees a problem and is seeking a solution to that problem. And it could be a need in the marketplace for something, or in today's world, the need to do something about climate change, the need to do something about poverty, the need to do something about hunger. There are so many big issues that the entrepreneur can approach. And in all likelihood, while government is very important all over the world, the private sector, people who launch companies, are going to make a big difference in the end.
Yeah.
So, Jan, what advice do you have for someone interested in your program? How do they contact you with questions and move this forward?
Okay, first of all, apply. That's the very important start. Or reach out to our admissions team. That's a good start, because they can help you to redirect. And They can redirect you to myself or to somebody from the Entrepreneurship Center, from some of the entrepreneurship professors, maybe somebody from our family business team. So everybody's different. So that I think it's a good start, particularly for general questions. Now, if you have very specific question, they also can then directly pass you on. If it's also something else, of course, I'm reachable via LinkedIn as well.
Right, exactly. Costas, what advice do you have for people interested in your program?
First of all, we're looking for curious individuals. So people who will go on our website, they will have a look at this, but then we're looking for people who will enact upon the curiosity, which means that they will join us in the masterclass, or they will see how, the courses are run. So very often, they can join us in the course, or we have some weekends where we take them through, for instance, the curriculum and then the program. So for us, it's great. We're looking for students who will move beyond the internet, who will move beyond the brochure, and who would like to actually meet us in person. To me, this is a great student who shows this kind of qualities, and we will love to work with these students, and we will love to meet the students.
Maybe John, if you give me one, I think
yeah.
Maybe to add something which I just like what Costa said, and what we also do quite well is, and I think that's a general advice for students applying to MBA programs, whether that's for entrepreneurship or others. I think there are a lot of good programs around, and I think often it's a matter of fit. The fit and not fit to the institution, but particularly to the other students. I think it's you picking more your colleagues of the future, your friends. You used the word family, we use it as well, very much. And therefore go, do your homework, very important, it's a good signal, but then go on campus, speak to the students, go on campus, visit classes, and then see if this is the environment where you fit. And it's sometimes very true that a great MBA candidate, but maybe not for ESADE or not for BICE, but for another school. And that's to figure this out. I think it's very important to have connections to the school and reach out to the school, speak to people, attend classes, go on campus, because the difference is not how marketing 101 is taught. It's the culture, the feel and the vibe of each place. And it's much more a matter of fit than other criteria.
Very good advice. Costas and Jan, so good to be with you, and thank you so much for your time today. I think we had a great session. I think we solidly answered the question, do you need an MBA to be an entrepreneur? Yes, 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 you do. And I think we had a lot of great reasons why that is so. So Jan, the MBA director at ESADE Business School in Barcelona, and Costas Andropoulos, the professor of innovation entrepreneurship and the associate dean of MBA programs at the Bay School of Business in London. Thank you so much for your help. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Poets and Quants, for all of you out there, thanks for watching. Check them out.
Thank you.
Thank you.